Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, deep in the wilderness, and realized someone had been watching you while you slept? Not just passing through, not just wandering by, but circling your tent again and again, leaving footprints in the dirt as proof. That's what happened to me. Back in 1994, I was on a solo hunting trip in the Oregon wilderness. I wanted isolation. I wanted silence. And I got it. But I also got something else, something I still can't explain. It began with a lantern, a faint, glowing light weaving through the trees. But it ended with the most terrifying discovery of my life. I'd been hunting in Oregon many times before, but this trip was different. I wanted to push further, away from towns, away from campgrounds, away from any chance of bumping into another soul. The road into the forest narrowed until it was just a pair of ruts swallowed by undergrowth. Eventually, I had to park my truck and hike the rest of the way. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became, as though the forest itself was swallowing me whole. Towering pines rose on every side, their trunks damp with moss. Branches twisted overhead like a ceiling, blotting out most of the light. Even during the day, it felt dim, as if the sun could barely reach me. The air was cool, almost wet, and every step squished into layers of pine needles. By late afternoon, I found a clearing near a thin stream. It felt perfect, isolated, quiet, untouched. I set up my tent, built a small fire pit, and leaned my rifle against a tree. As I worked, I remember thinking, no one else will ever find this place. At the time, that thought comforted me. Later, it would terrify me. When the sun finally sank, the forest transformed. The moment the light disappeared, it was as though someone had pulled a curtain over the world. The woods turned black, thick and endless, the kind of black that makes you feel small, exposed. I sat by the fire, letting it crackle and snap, but the darkness pressed right up to the edge of the flames, as if waiting to swallow me the second the fire died. The forest wasn't silent, though. I remember the sounds, the shrill chirp of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, and once in a while, the unmistakable crunch of a branch far off in the dark. Out here, every sound seems closer, sharper, amplified. I kept telling myself it was just deer, or maybe elk, but the longer I sat there, the more I felt like something unseen was shifting just beyond the firelight. It must have been close to midnight when I saw it. At first, it was faint, like a trick of the eye, a soft glow weaving through the trees. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it was still there, bobbing gently, swaying back and forth as if someone were carrying it. It looked like a lantern, not a flashlight, not a headlamp, an old-fashioned lantern, glowing with this strange, pale light. The thing that unsettled me most wasn't the light itself, it was the direction it was coming from. I had hiked miles into the backcountry. There were no trails nearby, no cabins, no campsites. Nobody should have been out here. Yet there it was, moving between the trees, slowly, purposefully. I felt my throat tighten. For the first time in years, I was genuinely afraid. My first instinct was simple, call out. So I stood and shouted, "Hello, is somebody there?" The lantern froze. It hung there between the trees, unmoving, as if whoever held it had stopped in their tracks. I waited. My heart pounded in my chest. I expected a voice to answer, a hunter, a hiker, anyone. But the silence dragged on. The night air felt heavier, colder, pressing against me. And then, the lantern winked out. Not like it had moved away, not like it had gone behind a tree. It just vanished. The woods returned to pitch black. I stood there for minutes, maybe longer, staring at where it had been, but there was nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. Eventually, I sat back down by the fire, but the forest wasn't the same. The night felt hollow, too still. Even the crickets had stopped. Every time the fire cracked, I flinched. My eyes darted between the trees, waiting for that glow to return. Finally, I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and tried to force myself to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, every sound outside magnified tenfold. The wind through the branches sounded like footsteps. The creak of trees shifting in the night felt like someone circling just beyond the thin walls of nylon. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was just scaring myself. But deep down I knew I wasn't alone. When the first rays of sunlight bled through the trees, I felt relief wash over me. I crawled out of the tent, stiff and exhausted, desperate for the comfort of daylight. But the moment I looked down, my stomach turned to ice. All around my tent, in the dirt and pine needles, were footprints. Bare human footprints. They weren't random either. They circled the tent, over and over, like someone had paced around me for hours. And the strangest part, the prints were fresh. No shoes, no boots, just bare feet. Out here in the freezing cold forest floor, whoever or whatever it was, they hadn't just passed by, they had stood outside my tent, watching, listening, waiting. I didn't waste a second. I packed up in a rush, stuffing gear into my pack with shaking hands. I didn't even make breakfast. Every sound in the forest made me jump. The crunch of pine needles, the whisper of branches. I was convinced that if I turned my head fast enough, I'd see that lantern glow again. Or worse, the person who left those prints. I hiked out of those woods as fast as I could, rifle slung tight across my back, and I didn't stop until I reached my truck. But the entire time, I couldn't shake one feeling, that whoever had circled my tent was still watching me. To this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was a lost traveler, maybe a prank. But if it was a prank, it was one that required someone to walk barefoot alone, miles from civilization, in the freezing woods. And that lantern, it didn't fade like a normal light. It vanished, like it was never there at all. I've never camped alone since, not once. And sometimes when I think back, I wonder, if I hadn't called out that night, if I hadn't let them know I was there, would those footprints have stopped at the edge of the clearing or at the flap of my tent? Have you ever stepped into a place that felt wrong, not because of what you could see, but because of what you couldn't? Back in the fall of 2002, I stumbled into something deep in the woods of Maine that I've never been able to explain. A cabin that shouldn't have been there, a cabin that felt alive. And that night, the forest whispered my name. I wasn't alone. I was with my best friend Chris. We had been hiking for hours that afternoon, following a trail that felt like it was leading nowhere. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of our boots crunching on the damp ground. I remember joking that the forest felt like it was holding its breath. Chris didn't laugh. And then we saw it, a cabin, just sitting there in the middle of the woods. It wasn't on any map we had, and we hadn't passed a single sign of human life for miles. It looked old, too old to still be standing, but something about it didn't fit. The logs were weathered, the roof sagged, but the windows were all intact, sealed like it had been waiting for someone to open them. We decided to take a look inside. The door creaked open like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust exploded into the air, thick enough to choke on. And then we froze. The table in the center of the room was set with plates, forks, and cups. A pot sat in the middle, still filled with what looked like stew. But everything was buried under a thick coat of dust. It was like someone had prepared dinner and then vanished for 50 years. We told ourselves it was probably just an old hunting cabin. Strange, sure, but nothing supernatural. We set up our tent a few yards away, just close enough to keep the cabin in sight. That night, the forest was dead quiet. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that table, those plates waiting for people who never came back. And that's when I heard it, a whisper. My name, coming from the trees. I thought I was imagining it, but then it came again, clearer this time. Chris, it wasn't my voice. It wasn't Chris's either. It was soft, drawn out, almost like it was mocking us. I sat frozen, heart slamming in my chest. And then Chris sat up. He had heard it too. Neither of us moved. We just listened, and the forest kept whispering our names. And then we heard footsteps, slow, crunching the leaves just outside the tent, coming closer. Chris grabbed the flashlight and shined it through the thin tent wall. Nothing, just trees. But the footsteps kept moving, circling us. That was when I realized they weren't footsteps at all. They were too light, too soft, like something dragging itself through the leaves. Desperate for answers, Chris turned the light toward the cabin. That's when I saw it. A face in the window, pale, hollow-eyed, staring straight at us. And the second the beam of light touched it, it vanished. We didn't wait. We didn't pack. We just ran. Through the trees, tripping, falling, slamming into branches. Behind us, the whispers grew louder, chasing us, calling our names over and over. I swear I felt cold fingers brush against my neck as I ran. We didn't stop until we hit the road hours later, collapsing under a streetlight like survivors of a nightmare. I've never gone back. I'll never set foot in those woods again. But sometimes, I still dream about that cabin. And in those dreams, the table isn't dusty anymore. The plates are clean, the stew is hot, and I can hear chairs sliding across the floor as someone finally sits down to eat. So if you ever find a cabin deep in the woods, untouched by time, don't go inside, don't look too closely, and for God's sake, don't stay the night. Have you ever seen something so impossible that your brain refuses to accept it? Something so unnatural that even when it's right in front of you, you try to convince yourself it isn't real? That happened to me in the summer of 1985, deep in a forgotten valley in West Virginia. I went out there just to fish, alone, thinking I'd spend a quiet day by the water. But instead, I found myself face to face with something that I still can't explain. Something that shouldn't have been there. And if I close my eyes right now, I can still see her standing by the river. Back then, I was in my mid-20s. I loved fishing, more for the quiet than the sport. A buddy of mine had told me about a little stretch of river, way off the main roads, tucked deep into the woods. He said no one went there anymore. I didn't know why, but I liked the sound of it. Peace, solitude. So one hot July afternoon, I parked my truck on a dirt trail, slung my tackle box over my shoulder, and made my way down into the valley. The woods were alive with cicadas, but even then I remember thinking it felt too quiet, like the sound never really reached the ground. The river was calm when I reached it, wide, slow, and dark, like a ribbon of glass. I picked a spot where a cluster of flat rocks jutted into the water and set up my line. The sun was already sinking behind the trees, painting everything in a dull orange glow. I remember thinking, this was perfect. I had the entire valley to myself, or at least I thought I did. I don't know how long I was sitting there before I noticed her. Across the river, maybe 30-40 feet away, there was a woman. She was just standing there, right on the edge of the opposite bank. She wore a long white dress, the kind you'd expect to see at a wedding or a funeral. She didn't move, she didn't wave, she didn't even seem to breathe. She just stood there, staring at me. And even from across the water, I swear her face was pale as bone. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining her. Maybe she was just a trick of the light, a pale tree trunk, something my mind turned into a person because I was alone. But the longer I stared, the more I realized she was real. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. I didn't want to shout. I didn't want her to answer. Something deep in my gut told me not to. Then my fishing line snagged. I glanced down to untangle it, just for a second, and when I looked back up, she was gone. The bank was empty. My chest tightened. I stood up, scanning the trees, thinking maybe she walked off. But the woods were still, silent, empty, like she'd never been there at all. And that's when I noticed the rocks where she'd been standing were wet with fresh footprints. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, but I couldn't make my legs move. I just stood there, staring at those wet prints, knowing, absolutely knowing, that she had been standing there only seconds ago. My mind started racing. Had she gone into the woods? Was she still watching me, hidden behind the trees? Or worse, had she crossed the river without a sound? I packed up in seconds, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my tackle box. I didn't even reel in properly. I just grabbed everything and started back up the trail. Every step, I felt like she was behind me, like if I turned around, I'd see her white dress following in the shadows. The woods, once so alive with insects, were dead quiet. All I could hear was my heartbeat, pounding in my ears. I made it back to my truck, threw everything inside, and tore out of there as fast as the dirt road would let me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. When I got home, I found something smeared across the floor of my truck. Damp, muddy footprints, bare, human, and I know I didn't make them. I never went back to that river, not once, but I still wonder what I saw that night. Was she real? A ghost? Something older? All I know is I wasn't supposed to see her, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't supposed to see me either. If you like these horror stories, please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel for more true horror stories. Have you ever been out in the wilderness, miles from the nearest road, far above the tree line, when the silence of the mountains suddenly tears apart with a scream? Not the call of an animal, not the shriek of an eagle, but the raw, desperate, heart-stopping sound of a woman crying for help. I have, and to this day, I wish I had never followed it. It was the summer of 2009. I was with 3 friends, people I trusted, people I'd hiked and camped with dozens of times before. We weren't weekend warriors. We knew our gear, knew our routes, and had pushed ourselves through some of the hardest terrain the Rockies had to offer. This trip was supposed to be no different. We were heading up toward the timberline, that strange place where the world feels caught between 2 landscapes. Below, thick forests swallow the ground in green. Above, it's nothing but exposed rock and endless sky. Right in between, though, is where the land feels fragile, almost haunted. We reached a clearing just before sunset and set up camp. The air was thin, crisp, and biting cold, even though it was July. Our tents looked small against the towering backdrop of jagged peaks, and the glow of the campfire was the only warmth for miles. At the time, it felt peaceful. Remote, yes, but that was the point of coming out here. Silence, stars, escape. Looking back now, I wonder if that silence was trying to warn us. It started when the fire had burned low. We were just sitting around, telling stories, letting our food settle, when it cut through the night like a blade. A scream, high, sharp, and unmistakably human. Every one of us went rigid. I've heard mountain lions, I've heard coyotes. I know what animals sound like when they cry out. This was not that. This was a woman. At first it was faint, like it came from half a mile away, but the way it echoed in that thin alpine air made it sound impossibly close. We waited. I remember clutching the edge of my chair, holding my breath, and then it came again. Louder this time, sharper, and filled with words that made my skin crawl. Help me. We looked at each other. No one wanted to be the first to say it, but we all knew. Someone was out there. Someone needed help. We grabbed our headlamps, flashlights, a couple of knives, and started moving toward the sound. The forest swallowed us quickly, the glow of our fire fading into nothing behind us. The ground was uneven, roots snaking across our path. Every breath burned from the thin air, and our boots crunched loudly in the silence. But the scream kept pulling us forward. Every time we thought we were close, it moved, just a little further, just beyond the next cluster of trees, always just out of reach. That's what broke us. The voice wasn't stationary. It didn't stay where we first heard it. We'd hear a cry just ahead, sprint toward it, our lights bouncing between the trees, but then suddenly it was behind us, or off to the left, or deeper still into the woods. It didn't make sense. No one could move that fast. No one could cover that kind of distance in seconds, not with broken ground, steep slopes, and thick trees. But each time, it was clear. A woman, screaming, begging, pleading for help. It was like being toyed with, like it wanted us to follow. After nearly an hour of chasing that sound, our adrenaline was gone. Exhaustion set in, and for the first time I noticed how wrong everything felt. The forest had gone dead quiet. No crickets, no owls, not even the faint whisper of wind through the trees. Just our ragged breathing. One of my friends finally broke the silence. His voice was shaking when he whispered, "What if it's not real?" We tried to laugh it off, but the truth sat heavy in all of us. We were no longer looking for someone to save. We were looking for a way out. We were about to turn back when it happened. The scream came again, but this time it wasn't far away. It was right next to us. A shrill, piercing cry ripped through the night. It was so close I swear I felt it in my bones, like the sound itself had shape and weight. We spun in circles, flashlights darting through the trees, but there was nothing. Nothing at all. Just darkness. That was enough. We didn't say a word, we just ran. By the time we stumbled back into camp, the fire had burned down to nothing but glowing embers. We collapsed, shaking, our chests heaving from fear and exhaustion. No one spoke, not a single word. We just sat there in the dark, our flashlights clutched in white-knuckled hands, waiting for dawn. The hours stretched on forever. Every rustle of branches made us flinch. Every creak of the forest set our nerves on fire. But the scream never came again. When the sun finally broke over the ridges, the world looked normal. Bright, calm, almost beautiful. And yet we all felt the same, haunted, like something had been standing at the edge of camp, watching us all night. We packed up fast and made our way down to the trailhead, barely speaking the whole hike. As soon as we reached civilization, we reported everything to the rangers. They didn't laugh, they didn't dismiss it. They organized a search. For 2 days, teams combed the woods, dogs, radios, volunteers, but nothing turned up. No lost hikers, no missing campers, no women reported stranded or injured, just empty forest. It was as if what we heard had never existed. It's been years, and still I hear it sometimes. Not in the woods, but in my dreams. That voice crying out for help, screaming from somewhere just beyond sight. And every time I wake up, I wonder the same thing. What if it wasn't human? So if you ever find yourself in the Rockies, close to the timberline, and you hear a woman screaming for help, don't follow it. Please, don't make the same mistake we did. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and realized someone you trusted, someone right beside you, was just gone? Not ran off, not packed up, not wandered away, but vanished. That's what happened to me in the summer of 1991, deep in the Alaskan wilderness. A trip that was supposed to be nothing more than fishing, hunting, and peace in the wild turned into a nightmare I still can't explain. It was me, my buddy Dave, and our friend Mark. We'd driven hours on a dirt road, then taken a boat upriver until we were completely cut off from civilization. No towns, no cabins, no other people. Just endless forest, mountains in the distance, and the sound of the river rushing by. It was beautiful, the kind of place that makes you feel alive and very, very small. That evening, we sat around the fire, joking, passing a bottle, and planning the hunt for the morning. Mark was the most excited. He had this brand new rifle and couldn't wait to track game. By the time we crawled into our tents, the fire was down to glowing embers and the forest was silent. But the silence in Alaska, it's different. It's not peaceful. It's heavy, like the trees are holding their breath. I remember waking up sometime past midnight. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The forest was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. And then, I thought I heard something. A branch snapping, way too close to camp. I sat up, straining my ears, but all I heard was the wind shifting through the trees. When I woke the next morning, I noticed something strange. Mark's sleeping bag was empty. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone to take a leak or started an early hunt. But his boots were still there, his pack was still there. Even his rifle was leaning against the tent wall. It was like he just stepped out barefoot and never came back. We searched the area and finally spotted footprints in the mud near the tree line. Bare footprints. They led straight into the forest, deeper and deeper. It was crazy. The ground was cold, damp, covered in pine needles and sharp stones, but Mark had walked straight through it. No hesitation, no gear, no boots. Just barefoot. We followed those tracks for almost an hour, and then just like that, they stopped. No broken branches, no sign of a fall, no blood, just a set of bare prints in the moss that ended in the middle of nowhere, like Mark had been lifted straight off the ground. We shouted his name until our voices were raw. We fired shots into the air, hoping he'd answer. Nothing. The forest swallowed our voices like it didn't want them to come back. And the deeper we searched, the more wrong the woods began to feel. The air was heavy. The silence was crushing. I swear at one point I heard something moving parallel to us, like footsteps, but never close enough to see. By late afternoon, we stumbled back to camp, exhausted and terrified. We kept the fire burning all night, afraid to let the dark fully close in. I didn't sleep, because I could feel it out there. Something watching us from the tree line. Something that had taken Mark and was deciding if it wanted more. Every crack of a twig sent us spinning around. I thought I saw shapes moving between the trees, just at the edge of firelight. And sometimes I swore I heard Mark's voice, calling my name. At first light, we packed up and left. We didn't even talk about it. We just left. The Rangers later organized a search. They brought dogs, helicopters, a whole team. They found nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a bone, not even a scent. It was like Mark had never existed at all. To this day, I don't know what happened. People say maybe he went crazy, maybe he ran off, maybe a bear got him. But I know better. I saw those tracks. I saw where they ended. Something took him. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was is still out there, watching, waiting. All I know is this. If you ever camp in the wilds of Alaska and the night grows too quiet, leave. Don't wait. Don't wonder. Just leave. Do you know what it feels like to hear a sound in the woods that you know shouldn't exist? A sound so wrong, so out of place that your body reacts before your mind does? Back in the fall of 1977, I was hunting with my brother in Michigan's Upper Peninsula when we followed an old logging road deep into the forest. By the time the sun went down, we swore we heard metal, dragging, screeching, coming from the trees. Machines that should have been dead and rusting were waking up again. We weren't supposed to be there. The road was barely visible, swallowed by weeds, saplings, and fallen leaves. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. My brother Tom spotted it first and said, "Let's see where it goes. Maybe there's good hunting ground past here." I wasn't so sure, but curiosity pulled us forward. Every step felt like we were trespassing somewhere long forgotten. About a mile in, the road widened just enough to reveal something. Metal. Old, rusted machinery, half-eaten by the forest. Skidders, loaders, rusted-out trucks. Their frames were twisted, tires rotted away. I expected just rust and decay, but then I saw the claw marks. Deep, ragged gashes carved into steel. Not scratches, gouges. Something had raked across the machines with impossible strength. Tom laughed it off, said it was probably vandals or weather damage. But I knew weather couldn't carve metal like that. As we walked between the hulking machines, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was listening to us. Every sound, the crunch of leaves, the snap of twigs, echoed too loudly. And beneath it all, there was something else. A faint hum, like metal groaning far away. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low, painting the treetops orange. Shadows stretched long across the rusted hulks, making them look alive, like skeletons of beasts. I wanted to turn back, but Tom insisted we push on a little further. "We'll circle back," he said. But the deeper we went, the heavier the air felt, and that hum, it was getting louder, metallic, groaning. Then it happened, a sound that froze us where we stood, metal dragging against stone, screeching, long, tortured. It came from deeper in the woods. I felt the hair on my neck stand straight up. Tom muttered, "What the hell was that?" But I already knew. I'd heard it before, working in a shop. The sound of steel on steel, only this time, it was moving. It came again. Metal grinding, chains clinking, gears groaning to life. It was getting closer, echoing all around us, like the machines themselves were dragging their broken bodies through the trees. But we could see nothing, just darkness swallowing the road. The dragging sound grew closer. Then one of the loaders behind us creaked, slowly. The metal groaned like bones shifting after decades of stillness. I swore the rusted bucket lifted an inch. Tom shouted that it was the wind, but there was no wind, just the rising chorus of groaning, screeching, dragging, like the whole graveyard of machines was waking up. We ran, crashing through brush, stumbling over roots, trying to find the road back. But the dragging metal followed us. Not just one machine, many, like a parade of rusted monsters grinding through the trees, the sound of chains snapping, gears screeching, steel tearing itself free. We didn't look back. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see. When we finally burst out of the road and back onto the main trail, I dared to look behind me. The forest was dark, silent again. No footsteps, no screeching, just stillness. Tom swore it was our imagination, but his face was pale as snow. We never went back. And even now, all these years later, I sometimes wake at night to that sound in my head, metal dragging against stone. Like something old is still moving out there in the Michigan woods, waiting. I never went back there. None of us did. But sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I swear I can still hear it. That dragging, groaning metal. like those machines weren't abandoned at all, like they're still moving, still waiting for someone stupid enough to walk down that road again. And if you ever find yourself hunting in northern Michigan and you see an old, overgrown trail cutting into the woods, don't go down it, because some roads were never meant to be walked again. Have you ever felt like you were being watched when you knew you were completely alone? I don't mean by a person or even an animal. I mean something else, something that shouldn't exist. In the summer of 2010, deep in the Montana wilderness, I camped alone beneath a ridge. And that night, I saw eyes, glowing eyes, watching me from above. At first, I thought they were animals, but when every pair blinked at the exact same time, I knew I was looking at something far darker, something not of this world. And I'll never forget the way they came down the ridge, moving in perfect unison, step by step, straight toward me. I had been planning the trip for weeks. I wanted to escape the noise of traffic, the constant hum of city life, and the glow of streetlights that drowned out the stars. Montana seemed perfect. Endless forests, rugged mountains, and sky so big it felt like it could swallow you whole. I drove for hours until the pavement gave way to dirt roads, winding through pines until I found the perfect spot, a clearing at the base of a high ridge. I parked, hauled out my pack, and pitched my tent beneath the shadow of that ridge. It was peaceful, quiet, untouched, alive with the smell of pine and the crisp bite of mountain air. I thought I'd found a slice of paradise. I had no idea what was waiting for me once the sun went down. When the sun dipped behind the ridge, the forest turned into a wall of black. I lit a fire, cooked a simple meal, and leaned back to watch the stars. The night was quiet, unnaturally quiet. No owls, no insects, no rustling, just silence, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. That's when I saw them. 2 glowing dots on the ridge above me. Eyes. At first I laughed it off, probably a deer, I thought, but then another pair appeared, and another. Soon I counted at least 6 pairs of eyes staring down at me from the ridge. I told myself it was a herd of elk or mountain lions, though my stomach churned at the thought. But then I noticed something strange. The eyes didn't shift, didn't move, didn't blink. They just watched, like they were waiting. And then, all at once, every single pair of eyes blinked. In perfect unison, my heart froze. No animal does that. Nothing in the natural world moves like that. The eyes began to move. Slowly, methodically, they descended the ridge together. Not like animals scattering or hunting. No, they moved as one, a perfect, synchronized descent down toward my campfire. I couldn't move. My hands gripped my knees, trembling. The fire crackled louder, like it knew what was coming. I wanted to tell myself it was just in my head, but the eyes kept coming closer, step by step. As they reached halfway down, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Shadows behind the eyes. Tall, thin figures, like silhouettes of people. Their movements were too smooth, too calculated, and all of them staring straight at me. Every instinct in my body screamed, run, but where? The ridge blocked one side, the thick woods swallowed the other. My gear, my tent, everything I had. I couldn't think about it anymore. All I could think about was getting away. I bolted. I left the fire, the tent, my pack, everything. I just ran into the woods, branches slashing my arms, roots catching at my feet. I didn't care. I just needed to get as far away as I could. And as I ran, I heard it. The crunch of synchronized footsteps behind me. Not chasing, not rushing, just following. Calm, steady, like they knew I couldn't escape. At some point, I tripped. I don't even remember how far I'd gone. I hit the ground hard, my chest heaving. But when I looked back, the eyes weren't there. The forest was empty, silent. I spent the rest of that night curled under a tree, shivering. Every sound, every twig snap made me think they'd found me again. But nothing came. The eyes never returned. When dawn finally broke, I staggered back to camp. My tent was torn open. My pack was gone. The fire was out. But the strangest part, no tracks, no footprints, just my own, running into the woods. I never went back for my gear. I never camped alone again. To this day, I still wake up some nights feeling like eyes are on me in the dark. I don't know what I saw in those Montana woods, but I know this: it wasn't human, and it wasn't an animal. If you ever find yourself camping in Montana and you see glowing eyes on the ridge, leave. Don't wait. Don't wonder. Just run. Because some things in the dark don't want to be watched. They want you to be theirs. I remember the moment the pine fell like it was a live wire cutting through the night air. Except there was no crack, no thud, no sound at all. It just bent, like a shadow giving up, and lay there where it should have made the loudest noise I'd ever heard. I'm still trying to figure out how something that massive can die and the world not notice. We'd driven into Vermont on a Friday, 2 cars full of cheap gear and louder jokes than sense. The Green Mountains were supposed to be a weekend escape. Smoke from campfires, beers, stupid dares. We were kids who still thought we could outrun the dark. We picked a pull-off near a service road, packed down a site beneath a rim of tall pines, and told ourselves the mountain would hold no surprises. That first night, everything felt ordinary. We ate cold sausages, told ghost stories, dared each other to creep up the ridge. The fire crackled. The owls cried in that distant way owls do. But there was also, if I'm honest, this undercurrent of silence I couldn't name. Between the pops of the fire and the laughter, there were pockets of nothing, like the air had been cleared of smaller sounds. Sometime after midnight, the fire was low, and half of us had gone to our tents. I was up with Alex, just listening. We noticed it at the same time, an absence of the small noises that stitched the woods together. No insects chattering like a radio, no distant cars, even the breeze seemed thin. Our breaths felt loud. When we strained to hear, everything else seemed to fold away. Then it happened. From the ridge, something enormous moved. At first it looked like wind, then the whole outline of a pine bent and hinged. We watched it topple. We watched the whole thing in a clear line of sight. The crown swung, the trunk struck the earth, but there was no sound. No creak, no snap, no crash. Just the empty space where a noise should have been. We all stared. For a second, the world held its breath. We thought the sound would follow, like an echo delayed, and we stood there waiting for the scar. Nothing came. Alex laughed first, this sharp, nervous bark that sounded obscene. We scrambled, shoes thumping, flashlights jagged across the slope. My heart beat like a second engine. Every step felt too loud. We kept expecting to hear that tree again, as if sound could arrive late and punish us. The hike up was thin with birdsong at first, like someone had turned the volume back up in the world. We joked too loud to fight the fear. Halfway there, we found marks. Not broken roots, but a shallow scrape in the moss, like something heavy had slid and left a long, pale thread. My stomach rolled. The path was less a trail and more a record of what had been happened to the hill. When we crested the last rise, my legs went weak. The tree was standing upright, exactly where it had been before, intact trunk, full crown, no scar, no disturbance. The ground around it was undented. Needles lay as if they hadn't known a drop. It was like someone had placed it back. We stared until one of us laughed, the laugh that goes thin when the body tries to release panic. We touched it. The bark was warm under my fingertips, not cooled by the night. No sap had leaked where it should have split, no fresh wood under the roots. And then Alex noticed the needles. They were layered in a pattern that looked too neat, like someone had combed them down. There were no scars, yet the trunk beyond a certain height had a faint vertical seam that didn't belong to nature. Around the trunk, pressed into the moss at knee height, were small depressions arranged in a pattern. They weren't animal tracks. They were deliberate, 5 shallow dents like fingers pressed flat in the earth. They were the size of a palm. My breath fogged. For one horrible second, I thought of our own prints, turned inward. I found it by accident, a small knot the size of a coin that when pressed gave under my thumb like rubber. The seam I'd seen earlier peeled back a fraction under slight pressure, revealing nothing but darkness. For a heartbeat, I thought of doorways. Then a sound I could not explain. Not a creak, not a groan. It was like a throat clearing, low and deliberate, resonant inside the trunk itself. We stepped back. When the sound came again, it wasn't outside us. It felt internal, like the mountain exhaling. The radio hiccuped and then cleared. For a blink, the voice on the radio said only one syllable: home. Alex swore he could hear whispering in the needles, words that bent like roots. My rational mind tried to rewrite it: tinnitus, sleep deprivation, mass hysteria. But my bones felt hollow with a new knowledge. Something in that place didn't belong to the usual rules. We should have left. Any sane person would have left. But leaving felt like admitting the world had rules that could be broken, and maybe that would let whatever it was step in. We argued until our voices turned flat. In the end, we did the only childish thing left. We tried to make it laugh. We shouted, we threw a stick, we clapped. It was a stupid, childish test. The stick hit the trunk and barely made a sound. Then the world slipped. The trees around us tilted, too slow to be wind. Shadow pooled in a ring around the root. Every color dulled as if someone had pulled a film over reality. The air pressed against our chests. For one long minute, we were all small and loud in an enormous quiet. I saw, with the clarity of someone climbing out of a dream, the seam along the trunk open wider. A blackness breathed out, and whatever it exhaled tasted like old iron. We ran. This time there was no laughing or bravado. The path became a ribbon of panic, hands grabbing at each other, stones flying out from underfoot. Behind us, the trees unrolled like old film. I remember feeling a pressure on my back, like a palm pushing, as if the mountain tried to hold us in place. At the bottom, the camp looked wrong, tilted angles, a mug frozen mid-spill. We packed in silence. Nobody joked. The drive out was wet and gray, every mile a small relief. We filed the thing away into stories we told later. The time the tree fell without a sound. But even months after, I couldn't shake small things. A stump that looked newly smoothed. A bird that avoided a certain ring of pines. My dreams full of seams. I tell that story because a part of me still listens for a sound that never came. Sometimes, late at night, I stand by my window and listen. I listen for the little noises of the world to stitch themselves together. And in the silence between, I think of that seam in the pine and the slow way it healed, as if nothing had ever happened at all. If you ever find yourself in the Green Mountains and you see a tree that looks too neat, too whole for where it stands, don't touch the knot, don't test the seam. Walk away and count your footsteps. Make sure you're the one who leaves sound in your wake. Thanks for watching Sinister Horror Diaries, where the shadows speak and the stories never end. Stay safe, stay scared, stay sinister. And if you're brave enough for more, click one of the videos on your screen now and step back into the shadows with me.